One of the most striking statements in the founding documents of the American democracy was the phrase from James Madison that not all men are angels. And besides failing as a statement of sound theology, because angels are distinct sentient beings, its applicability even applies in a pandemic crisis that has become the focus of a presidential election, especially as the battle against a novel coronavirus begins to shift from a non-pharmacological attempt to prevent its spread in a $1 trillion industry of facial coverings to one in which the nation's only doctor serving as governor has now announced a plan to mandate vaccinations. And Ralph Northam has sent forth one early surrogate emissary, constitutional scholar Stuart Harris from Lincoln Memorial University Law School, ranked 148th of 194 best law schools in the nation, to argue that in one Supreme Court case, Jacobs v. Massachusetts, dealing with the smallpox vaccination back in 1905, the Supreme Court basically said the state has the power, effectively, to strap you down and stick a needle in your arm and make you get vaccinated, which, quite frankly, is far more intrusive than putting you under quarantine, and certainly much more intrusive than mandating you wear a mask when you're out in public. As pure issue of constitutional law, Professor Harris thought that any governor pursuant of the police power should be able to mandate the wearing of masks. But he conceded that a lot would depend on the actual wording of the Virginia Constitution and of the Virginia public health laws. Very true indeed. Other surrogates for the governor, like Lowell Feld at Blue Virginia, the progressive blog, have argued that the public health response is not about your rights. And to an extent, Feld is very correct in recognizing it is not about the rights of Democrats, but the governor's great concerns about their wrongs, and perhaps validated fears from witnessing Democrat-controlled jurisdictions so out of control that he was forced to delay the reopening in the progressive strongholds of Northern Virginia, and now is re-implementing restrictions in localities like Hampton Roads. But perhaps perception is not always the reality. Does it necessarily follow if infections are rising, they are being caused by person-to-person transmission, as would be the case for an infectious communicable disease? Answering this very question, focused on the facts and not fixated on feelings, is very important for Governor Ralph Northam, because in the 1905 smallpox vaccination case upon which his surrogate relied, the Supreme Court made it very clear that if a statute purporting to have been enacted to protect the public health, the public morals, or the public safety has no real or substantial relation to those objects, or is beyond all question a plain, palpable invasion of rights secured by the fundamental law, it is the duty of the courts to so adjudge and thereby give effect to the Constitution. This inquiry by reviewing courts has been described in other decisions with words describing regulations that impose an undue burden. You may have heard this in abortion cases, or regulations that are not reasonably calculated or bear a rational relationship. At the end of the day, Governor Northam cannot simply declare that there is a general pandemic condition affecting the world and then do whatever he wants, as he has actually argued that he could in the court successfully, stating it is difficult to imagine a more legitimate government interest than preservation of life and health during a global pandemic. The government has significant interest in protecting the health, safety, and welfare to citizens. And quoting Workman v. Mingo County Board of Education, a Fourth Circuit case, he has stated that a state's wish to prevent the spread of communicable diseases constitutes a compelling interest. but by statutory definition, a communicable disease of public health threat means an illness of public health significance, as determined by the state health commissioner in accordance with regulations of the Board of Health, caused by a specific or suspected infectious agent that may be reasonably expected or is known to be readily transmitted directly or indirectly from one individual to another, and has been found to create a risk of death or significant injury or impairment. Several findings indicate that a novel coronavirus described as COVID-19 is not, in fact, a communicable disease, being transmitted by droplets exchanged from person to person within close contact or 6 feet, but even caused 239 scientists beginning of July to petition the World Health Organization that had already begun to transform its own paradigm to recognize that they see strong and convincing evidence that a novel coronavirus has been transmitted as an aerosol or through particles smaller than 5 microns in the air that operate differently, quite differently under fluid dynamics. Early findings in China found very few reports of hospital outbreaks or infections of healthcare workers, which is a prominent feature of MERS and SARS, and trace contact found only an infection rate as low as 0 to not even 5%, compared to measles, which has an infection rate of 90% as one of the most highly infectious diseases known to man. These findings made even the World Health Organization suggest that the pathogen was not an infectious disease until the very end of March. And Northam had already locked down the entire Commonwealth of Virginia at that point in disregard for World Health Organization guidance and in violation of statutory requirements that he define an affected area where the alleged communicable disease was supposed to be presenting its lethal effects. In fact, the only point at which World Health authorities had considered the possibility that a novel coronavirus might be an infectious disease was within the context of developing vaccinations, which would require a long ramp up in testing and which would require such a determination to provide a profit incentive for medical research corporations to move forward and commence an expensive undertaking. Nobody does anything for nothing. Most distressingly, cases like U.S. v. Chandler in 1949 suggest that a conspirator need not achieve his purpose to be found culpable, but need only demonstrate a malicious purpose, such as engaging in willful blindness. And Governor Northam appears to have done so, not just with regard to preventing what should have been preventable deaths of the elderly in nursing homes, who now comprise over half of the fatalities, to the number 3 killer in America. But also there is evidence, strong evidence beyond a reasonable doubt, that Governor Northam, a doctor, neglected the task of commencing a rigorous trace contact follow-up operation, as they did in China, that would have enabled him to focus efforts in identifying the sources of infection and tracking its spread, but also presented clinical evidence to either prove or disprove the findings from over 55,000 confirmed cases of infection in China at the very beginning of the outbreak, that the contagion was not, in fact, a communicable disease, but rather being spread by another means of transmission that increasingly appears to be by aerosol, but apparently requiring a very high viral load to deliver an infectious dose. A viral load not yet recovered in sufficient quantities in air samples or on surfaces, or even in droplets from infected patients in the incubation period, where normally infection spread. Facts that suggest that the pathogen is being deployed strategically and tactically like a biological weapon. And Northam's decision, knowingly or unknowingly, wittingly or unwittingly, to promote profits for one of over 26 vaccines currently under development, amounts to aiding and abetting an enemy of the United States today responsible for the deaths of over 180,000 Americans, almost 2,500 Virginians, over half of them the elderly whose deaths could have been prevented from the very beginning. My name is Major Mike Webb, and I am running for U.S. Congress with liberty, honor, and excellence. By God, we shall make America great again. Honest. This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.